anti-Zionism or anti-Semitic? Two questions. I'm not answering either one yet. Just sit with them. Question number one. Is Mayor Mamdani an anti-Semite because he called Netanyahu's war in Gaza a genocide, or because he's the first New York City mayor in over 60 years to skip the Israel Day parade? Question two. Am I anti-Semitic? Me, sitting here, because I disagree, sometimes sharply, with how the current Israeli government has treated Palestinians and individuals who live in the West Bank. Here's my promise to you for the next 35, 40 minutes, whatever. I'm not going to tell you what to think about either of those two men. I'm going to hand you an actual tool, a test, 3 plain questions that you can point at any public figure, including me, and get a real answer instead of a gut reaction. Then we're going to run both of us through it, no script flipping, on camera. Your choice. Do you want to give a gut response based on a picture or something you saw, or would you like an actual, simple, easy tool that you can ask, and then you can sit back and say, yes, no, yes, yes, no. That's what I'm going to do this evening. Why do we need an actual test? Well, here's the problem I keep running into, and I bet you've seen it too. Someone criticizes the Israeli government, and within an hour, maybe 15 minutes, two totally different crowds have already reached totally different verdicts. One says, oh, he's obviously anti-Semitic, and the other says, obviously, just politics. And neither side did any actual work to get there. The word anti-Semite gets used so fast in both directions, it's starting to lose the ability to describe the real thing it's supposed to name. And that's dangerous in two directions at once. If we call every critic of an Israeli government policy an anti-Semite, we cheapen the word so badly that when actual anti-Semitism shows up, real Jew hatred, real violence, real conspiracy theories about Jews, people are numb to the alarm. Remember calling wolf? But if we wave away every use of classic anti-Semitic tropes because it's dressed up just as criticizing Israel, we let real harm walk through the front door wearing a political costume. So, what do we actually do about it? We stop reacting and start testing. Not, oh, this feels bad to me. Oh, this is not my political team or the other team, or oh, I don't think it's good and they shouldn't be allowed to say that. An actual, repeatable test you could hand to a stranger, and they would get roughly the same answer you would, regardless of which side they started on. However, it requires asking the test questions. It actually requires us to stop giving a gut reaction that doesn't help, doesn't solve, and actually makes things much, much worse. This isn't a test that I invented from scratch. It's built on a framework a lot of scholars of anti-Semitism use, most famously associated with Natan Sharansky. It's sometimes called the 3 Ds. I'm going to give you the plain language version, very simple, so each of us can ask the questions, knowing that it's not off the top of my head and that it wasn't invented to prove one side was right and everybody else is wrong. Natan Sharansky invited this so we could actually look at someone and reach a conclusion. Question 1. Is it aimed at a government or is it aimed at Jews? Important, so let me repeat question 1. Is it aimed at a government or at Jews? Is the criticism aimed at specific actions of a specific government? Russia, its attack on Ukraine, what it does to prisoners, what the Putin's government is doing to its own citizens. Is it war conduct? Is it settlement policy? A particular leader's decision? Or does it slide into blaming Jewish people generally? Jewish institutions which have nothing to do with that government? Or the Jews as a collective? Criticizing a prime minister's military strategy is question 1. That's passing. But blaming your local synagogue or Jewish people in your office is question 1, failing badly. Blame Russians. Would you blame Russians for what Putin is doing to Ukraine? Or do you go and say, I don't agree with the politics. I don't agree with Putin's government. And it's not about Russians living in New York who are American citizens now. Question 2. Is it a double standard? Would you apply the exact same standard, the exact same language, the exact same intensity to any other country doing something comparable? If you call it a war crime when Russia does it, but explode with outrage only when Israel does an identical thing, or if you'd accept any other country's right to exist and defend itself, but specifically deny that right to the one Jewish state on earth, that's a double standard. And double standards aim specifically at one Jewish country in the world, a real, documented pattern of anti-Semitism. It's not a coincidence. Question 3. Does it deny the right to exist or criticize how it's being used? There's a real difference between, I think this specific government is conducting this specific war badly, even criminally, and the Jewish people have no right to any state anywhere. The first is a policy position. The second edges toward denying Jewish self-determination as a concept. While very often the same person accepts self-determination for every other people on earth, that consistency is the tell. Israel and Palestine, not Palestine instead of Israel. Three questions. Government or Jews? Double standard or consistent standard? Policy criticism or existence denial? Now, we're going to use them. Keep them in your head. Okay, so let's do it for real. In July, Mayor Mamdani released a video statement calling Netanyahu the architect of what he called a horrific genocide, and said Netanyahu should be arrested and tried. Back in May, he became the first New York City mayor in more than 60 years to skip the Israel Day parade, something he said he would do throughout his campaign, while still directing the NYPD to provide full security for everyone who did march. In an October 7th anniversary statement, he mourned Israeli victims by name in one paragraph and criticized the Israeli government's conduct in 3. Okay? Let's do question 1. Government or Jews? His language targets Netanyahu and his government specifically, a prime minister, a military campaign, a policy. He is not, in these statements, blaming Jewish New Yorkers, synagogues, or Jews collectively. That's question 1. Passing, at least by his statements. Unlike a lot of your comments here on TikTok blaming me for what Netanyahu's government is doing. I'm an American citizen. I don't vote in Israel, and I don't support a lot of what he does. I don't support the policies. It's the same thing that the mayor said. But you, that's anti-Semitic. You want to blame me as a Jew for what the leader of a country is doing. You're going to blame all Russians in New York. You're going to stop eating borscht. You're going to throw bombs at Russian houses where Russians live, or boycott Russian restaurants. I haven't seen that. Now, it's worth noting that critics like the former Israel Defense Chief Gadi Eisenkot call the genocide framing dangerous and inflammatory. We have to watch our language, particularly as a mayor, a governor, or president of the United States. It's one thing having a beer at the barbecue and using language with someone, probably not appropriate, but you're with your friends. But once you have a forum, once you're a mayor, a governor, there is a responsibility not to use inflammatory or dangerous language. Let's run question 2, the double standard. Here's where it gets generally complicated. And I want to give you the legal picture because most coverage blurs it. So please bear with me because the legal picture is extremely important. In 2024, the International Criminal Court issued arrest warrants for Netanyahu for war crimes and crimes against humanity, specifically starvation as a method of warfare and attacks on civilians. That's a real, documented, legal finding. It's not genocide. Genocide is a separate, much heavier legal charge, and it's being argued in a very different court. The International Court of Justice is arguing genocide. The International Criminal Court charged Netanyahu, and that's often blurred, and that's an extremely important distinction to make. It's important to make because the International Court of Justice, in a case South Africa brought, that case is still in written arguments with no ruling expected for years. A United Nations Commission of Inquiry did separately conclude genocide was occurring, which is real and worth knowing, but a UN Commission's finding and a binding court judgment are not the same thing. It would be, I make statements here. I know I'm not the UN, but I make statements. Doesn't matter whether I make them or the UN has a commission, your church has a commission, or your friend's cousin have a commission. It's not the same as a binding court judgment. So, when Mandani says genocide, He's using the heavier word before the court, built to decide that very question, has decided it. Now, that's not automatically anti-Semitic, but it's worth naming as legally premature, and I'd hold any world leader, any country to that same precise standard. If I would then, this isn't a double standard. If I let it slide for another country's leader and pounce only here, it would be. Let's run question 3. Policy or existence? Nothing in these specific statements says Israel should not exist. The target is explicitly Netanyahu's conduct of this war, not Israel's right to be a country. He has separately called for ending occupation, for what he calls apartheid in the West Bank. Sharp policy positions, but positions about Israeli governed specific territory, not that a claim that a Jewish state has no right to exist. So here's where I land, and you're allowed to end somewhere else. By this test, calling a specific government's conduct genocide, even though I think that the word is legally premature, and skipping a parade as stated an act of political conscience, are policy positions. They're not anti-Semitism. On the text of what's actually been said, and that's what I'm going on, that doesn't mean I love the word choice. It doesn't mean every reaction to him has been wrong to push back on precision. But I think his language is inflammatory and legally ahead of the evidence. It's a very different sentence to say he is anti-Semitic. And I think a lot of people are collapsing those two into one sentence without actually doing the work. Now, someone just wrote, the world thinks. We're not talking about what the world thinks, by the way. The world thinks Coca-Cola is the best. The world thinks that the Dallas Cowboys, American football team, that's the world. The world has been wrong many times, by the way. I would point that the world has done lots of things. Look what's going on to immigrants seeking asylum here in the United States. Now, we have to wait for the World Court of Justice and suspend judgment until they say something. But if you want to go harsh and say genocide, okay, blame the Israeli government, but don't blame Jews. So I'll do what I said about Mondani when he used the word genocide. I said it's a heavy-handed word, a little premature to use. Okay, you can use it and talk about the government of Israel, but don't throw bombs in my synagogue. Don't try to kill me. Don't blame Jews. That makes you an anti-Semite. And therein lies the difference. Okay. Let's go to Rabbi Block. I have said clearly more than once on this show, I disagree with how the current Israeli government has handled the war in Gaza, its policy in the West Bank. I've grounded that criticism in Jewish legal categories I've taught here before. Pekuach nefesh, the preservation of life overriding nearly everything else. Bal tashchit, the prohibition on wasteful destruction. And the just war traditions demand that force be proportionate and necessary, not open-ended. So let's run question 1. Every one of my criticisms is aimed at specific government conduct. Decisions made by specific leaders, evaluated against specific legal and ethical categories. I've never on the show said a critical word about Jews as a people, about Israelis as a people, or about synagogues, a Jewish institution. Not anti-Semitic. Now, self-check on a double standard. I hold other countries, militaries, to the same proportionality Pekuach nefesh standard I'm holding to Israel too. I've done episodes on this show applying just war categories to American and Iranian conduct too, using the same Rodef, the same Baal Tashchit framework both times. Not a special harsher rule reserved for a Jewish state. I'm using it in Africa, in the Horn of Africa, against the rebels in the countries, against anywhere. I only ever overreached these categories when Israel was the subject. Now, that would be a real problem, and you'd have a right to call it out. But I've never singled Israel out. I've put it along with, this is how I judge. This is how Jewish law judges. Question 3, policy or existence. I have never once said here or anywhere that Israel shouldn't exist. Quite the opposite. My criticisms of specific policies comes from wanting the state to live up to the ethical tradition it claims to represent. 3, passing about as clear as it can be. So by my own test, the same one I just ran on somebody. I don't share a party with him. I don't share a platform. I don't agree about plenty of things. I come out the other side, not as an anti-Semite, not because I'm exempt, because the test doesn't exempt anyone, including me. I pass the test on merits, the same way you could check my work and reach a conclusion. And I want you to do that with anyone. I don't want this episode to leave you thinking I believe the anti-Semitism versus criticism line never gets crossed. It absolutely does. Certainly. And here's what it actually looks like when it does. The moment criticism shifts from Israel's government policy to, American Jews are secretly more loyal to Israel than to the United States. That's a century-old anti-Semitic trope wearing a political costume. Just watch for it. Watch for the shift from government to individuals, Jews. Holocaust inversion. Comparing Jews collectively to Nazis. The accusation of Jews murdering or doing things isn't political. It's hatred. How about punishing random Jews for a government's choice, vandalizing a synagogue, harassing a Jewish student, or targeting a Jewish-owned business because of something the Israeli government did? None of these people voted that government's action. Punishing them is collective blame, and that's what anti-Semitism runs on. Plain and simple. Government versus blaming Jews. Self-determination. Oh, you support Kurdish independence. Oh, you support Scottish independence. Catalan independence. Palestinian statehood. Oh, but a uniquely Jewish people don't get a state. That's the double standard. You're failing. If individuals, if ethnic, religious, cultural groups can have a homeland, we can criticize the politics of the government, but once you start saying it shouldn't exist, once you start saying Palestine instead of Israel, that's anti-Semitic. When you say Palestine alongside of Israel, now we're talking. None of these 4 require you to change your opinion about any specific war or any specific government. They just ask you to notice when the target quietly shifts from a government's decision to a whole people's existence. Yeah, isn't this just a way to give cover to anti-Israel rhetoric? Only if you skip the test. and just declare victory. The test is supposed to be able to fail people too, including people like you. That's what makes it a test, not a shield. Doesn't calling something legally premature let Israel get off the... No. It just means the word genocide carries a specific, heavy legal meaning. And using it before the court built a decision that questioned, ruled as a claim ahead of evidence. In either direction, you can think the conduct is horrific. You can still think the specific legal libel is jumping the gun. 3 questions: government or Jews? Double standard or consistent policy? Policy criticism or existence denial? Pointed at Mamdani? Pointed at me? Point it to your uncle at Thanksgiving. Point it to yourself. It'll hold up every time because it doesn't care who you already liked before you asked the question. And any of you who would like to come up with a different test or apply anything you want, rabbiblock@hotmail.com. You'll co-host with me next week. We can draw it up. And that's why we want to meet before, because we'll decide, do we want to do a he said, she said? Do we want to create a unified position? What is it you would like to do? Any of you who email me, and talk to me in my Zoom room, will co-host. Instead of writing these comments, instead of throwing things out that truly are anti-Semitic, they truly are, because you would not say that about Ireland. You wouldn't say that about Catalonia. You wouldn't say that about Kurds or Kurdistan. No, and that's a double standard. But my invitation stands. Thank you for watching tonight. Thank you for listening. And if you have suggestions for next Wednesday night, please send them. I'm open. I'm always looking for things to talk about. All lives matter. Pekuach nefesh.